The week's end top stories at NBR. Tallys Group files proceedings against Television New Zealand. A mission to get children into mountain biking. Evergrande's formal downgrade to default. And there's more coming right up. Kia ora and welcome to NBR This Week. We start with a wrap of the end of the week's top business stories from the authority in New Zealand business news since 1970, nbr.co.nz. Then we'll take a look back at the top NBR Today stories from the past week. I'm Paul Brennan. Thanks again for joining us. Tallys Group says it has filed proceedings in Auckland's High Court against Television New Zealand over what it calls false and defamatory broadcasts about TGL's operations. The broadcasts are put to air between July and November this year. Those stories concerned a host of things, including health and safety conditions in the company's Ashburton factory, the company's response to those who had contacted media, and alleged sexual harassment on one of the company's boats, among other things, in a string of stories by One News reporter Thomas Mead. Tallys said it told TVNZ the initial allegations concerning the health and safety of its employees spread across multiple work sites were false and defamatory, but the broadcast of them went ahead. After nearly 15 years of bootstrapping, the owners of New Zealand tradie marketplace Builderscrack have sold the business to an ASX-listed firm, High Pages, in a deal worth Australian $11.8 million. Founded in 2007 by Jeremy Wynne Harris, Mark Dixon and Keith Roberts with a $2,000 investment each, Builderscrack has facilitated more than NZ $250 million worth of work, $67 million of which was in the 2021 financial year. The transaction is earnings accretive to High Pages, with Builderscrack being operating cash flow and working capital positive. A sale process for landfill and recycling group Waste Management is seen concluding in March-April next year, sources say, after initial bids closed a week ago. Waste Management is owned by China's state-owned Beijing Capital Group, and a sale has been mooted for some months. Jack Groom of Sydney-based investment bank Citi, which is said to be advising on the sale, declined to comment on the process. It's understood there were several bids made for the company by the deadline of noon Australian time last Friday, and market sources indicate competition is likely to be keen. Kids Ride Shotgun is on a mission to get children into mountain biking, and what better way to do it than strapping them to the front of their parents' bikes. Although strapping them in does not nearly illustrate the care and craft that co-founders Dan Necklin and Tom Hayward have put into creating their shotgun kid seats for mountain bikes, the shotgun seat design gives kids aged between 2 and 5 years a front-mounted view of the off-road action, complete with handlebars, foot pegs and foot straps. The seat is also designed to protect the bike from scratches and scrapes that the founders experienced with existing child seats prior to devising their own product in 2017. China's giant property group Evergrande has failed to pay interest due on US $1.2 billion of bonds, ratings agency Fitch has reported, resulting in its formal downgrade to default status. The spectre of Evergrande's collapse has been looming over Asia's capital markets for months, leading to concern a default on its huge debts could have serious knock-on effects. In a statement issued overnight Friday, Fitch said it had downgraded Evergrande and its subsidiaries to restricted default status for non-payment of coupons on a subsidiary's US $645 million 13% bonds and US $590 million 13.75% bonds after the grace period lapsed on December 6th. Those are our top stories as we head into the weekend, the full versions of which, along with all our breaking business news, columns and opinion, are at nbr.co.nz right now. This is NBR This Week, a brief look back now at the week's top stories from our daily video business news bulletin, NBR Today. On Monday, National's new lineup. National leader Christopher Luxon has announced his new lineup, including giving former leader Judith Collins responsibility for research, science, innovation and technology and ranking her 19th in the caucus. Another former leader, Todd Muller, is spokesperson for oceans and fisheries and internal affairs, but is not ranked at all. Meanwhile, last week, Luxon went to Tauranga to announce the man Muller ousted as leader, Simon Bridges, was National's finance and infrastructure spokesperson and ranked third in the party's lineup. Today, Luxon announced all other portfolio responsibilities and ranked just the first 20 MPs as an alternative to Labour's cabinet. Those MPs who did not make the shadow cabinet are not ranked. Full details at nbr.co.nz. This is NBR This Week, the past week's top 5 business stories from NBR Today. From Tuesday, Kerer plea declined. An application by BNZ for summary judgment against expat businessman George Kerer over debts described as north of $60 million will go ahead next week after the High Court Tuesday, declined his application for adjournment. At a brief hearing before Justice Graham Lang, counsel for Kerer and his companies Lothian Capital Partners and Pine Holdings, Jason Goodall, argued that how much was actually owed to the bank was disputed, and there was not enough time to analyse the bank's evidence before the hearing on Monday and Tuesday next week, and that BNZ had provided 300 pages of loan transaction documents only on November 29th. Goodall also said receivers of income of a related Kerer company had confirmed Monday the sale of property at New Chums Beach, whose proceeds would be applied to the BNZ debt. This is NBR This Week, a brief look back at the week's top stories from our daily video business news bulletin, NBR Today. From Wednesday, challenge to Ross Asset Management settlement. The proposed distribution of a confidential settlement reached in the $100 million class action against ANZ Bank over its role in the David Ross Ponzi fraud has been challenged by investor Bruce Tichborne. In 2019, legal action on behalf of more than 500 Ross Asset Management investors was filed against ANZ, alleging dishonest assistance, knowing receipt and negligence by the bank contributing to their losses. The claim, funded by LPF Group, included allegations that ANZ knew Ross held client funds on their behalf and that Ross was misapplying client funds to reduce his firm's overdraft liabilities. This is NBR This Week, the past week's top 5 business stories from NBR Today. From Thursday, kiwifruit settlement reduced by costs. About 40% of the $40 million settlement reached between the government and more than 200 kiwifruit growers fighting for compensation over the devastating PSA 3 outbreak a decade ago was paid out in costs and fees to litigation funder LPF. The long-running class action negligence lawsuit was set for a week-long hearing in the Supreme Court in February before a $40 million settlement between the parties was announced. Claimant group Strathboss Kiwifruit, which represented 214 grower businesses, and post-harvest operator Seeker, had brought the case backed by litigation funder LPF Group. This is NBR This Week. Now we're up to Friday's top story. Tourism Holdings has Friday morning, announced a way through the pandemic's decimation of tourism and travel, saying it would merge with Australia's Apollo Tourism and Leisure Limited. Established in 1985 and listed on the ASX in 2016, Apollo is an RV company with operations in Australia, New Zealand, North America, Europe and the UK, and manufactures, rents, sells and distributes motorhomes, campervans and caravans in the same way as THL does, but on a smaller scale. Joining the NBR's Dita DeBoni was THL CEO Grant Webster.
The COVID pandemic has continued on for longer than what we all anticipated last year. It certainly created more of an opportunity to say, actually, are there more cost savings that we can achieve together and actually sort of get out of this whole thing faster.
THL CEO Grant Webster with Dita DeBoni there. That's our review of the week's top 5 NBR Today stories. You can find the full versions of those stories and more with all our daily breaking business news, columns and opinion at nbr.co.nz right now. Saturday at NBR, In Fact or Fiction, Brent Edwards and Grant Walker talk about COVID spin, the new national and fair pay politics. While on Sunday, in his weekly book review, Neville Gibson says opponents of far right ignore the world's worst baddies. I'm Paul Brennan. Thanks for watching NBR This Week. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to being with you again from Monday for NBR Today.